say, well, you can whatever you want to. Liberals say, well, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever makes you feel good, be whatever you want to be, as long as it doesn't necessarily hurt somebody else. So they try to control that and bring it to like a middle ground. But the reality of it is that's the end result of that, of absolute pleasure being your control. That's the end of it. That's where.
Well, what we have is a clash of worldviews in every case. Everywhere you go, you have a clash of worldviews. Yeah. Which is why I was saying when we talked about libertarians, while I jump into their camp a lot of times on political things and will totally agree with them, at the same time, I have a conflicting worldview with them when it comes to essentially what you want to do is say, well, we don't need to bring God into it. God shouldn't have a say in this. Right. In law. Okay, well, who should? You just told me that somebody should marry a goat. Okay, now no libertarian actually told me that, but if they say, well, gays should be allowed to get married, or male, female, transgenders, as long as they're happy and leave me alone, they can go do whatever. That's being consistent with libertarians. But what happens when you keep sowing that? Yeah. If you keep sowing that, what do you think you're going to reap? What kind of society do you reap when you take God, when you take law that is based out of Christian values? Yeah. When you take that out, what are we going to reap? And so now we're debating what bathroom to use. Okay?
Absolutely.
And I don't think anybody can, with a straight face, say that that's a good thing. That's a very nourishing thing for our country to be debating over who can use what bathroom and 68 genders and all that other nonsense. Yeah. So when you sow this kind of stuff, you need to think about it.
Right. Well, then it becomes,
does anything go?
You can't. That's the problem. You can't have everybody's perception be reality, or there is no truth. Truth will be constantly shifting and changing, and the reality of it is there is truth, and that's what he argues with O'Brien, when he's being re-educated there and tortured, is that there is truth. There is an absolute truth. Gravity exists, and he says no, gravity only exists because I say it exists and because you think it exists. But if I say it doesn't, and you think it, and you say it doesn't, and you perceive it as not existing, then it doesn't exist. Well, that's not true. There is an absolute truth, and this is where controlling the narrative is how you control people. You know what I'm saying? There is an absolute truth, but if you continue to shift that to where there is no truth, then it becomes easier to control people. Because then there is no truth. Because there's only the truth that I say there is, or everybody's truth has some value. No, everybody's truth doesn't have some value because it's not truth. It's like scientists do this all the time. I mean, what we're seeing now with COVID, what's true? Like I went online because I wanted to kind of equate 1984 to a lot of the totalitarian ideas that are happening now. With 1984, and you can't find anything actually on COVID. All you can find is people's opinions, or this scientists say these are the projected numbers. Well, I want to know the actual numbers, or I want to know how deadly really is it. Well, scientists say it's not as dead. It's more deadly than the flu. But do they have actual evidence of that? No, it doesn't matter if I have evidence. All that matters is that scientists said it. You know what I'm saying? Very similar to 1984. You can't find any information. And that's one of the problems I'm starting to see. One of the things you're starting to find in the world today, you can't go on Google and find anything that Google doesn't want you to find. And people are like, oh, well, we've got, you can to some degree, but you got to really look for it. Really, really look for it. And who's going to sit here and go through 1,084 pages, searches? So you can't find only what Google wants you to find to some degree unless you really look hard for it. And it's the controlling of the narrative. Google can control what you see and what you don't see, but Google has become the public forum. People are like, oh, that replaces the, I remember when we used to have, not dictionaries, but, they used to sell them door to door. Britannica, encyclopedias. Now we just go on Google, but Google, what you're getting on Google is what they want you to see. So it's not like you can't find, for instance, it's not like you can't find stuff on the Civil War, but 90% of the searches that are, particularly the ones that are going to come up first, are all whatever Google's perception of Civil War is going to be. There is no equality. Same with the media. When you go to the media, you're getting only the narrative that they want you to hear. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's part of how they're it's part of all the social conditioning.
Absolutely.
Like, so the narrative is set. If you don't if you don't stop driving diesels, the ozone layer is going to decay. And all the polar bears are going to. So they're driving this so that anybody that looks it up, that's what they're reading. The ozone layer is going to, and the polar bears, helpless cubs will die.
Yeah.
And they're just driving that, and it's like, what did driving diesels? How long do we have? Or you start looking up scientific facts, and all you get is basically what they want you to see.
Exactly.
And then if you have a dissenting opinion on it, or if you question it, you're treated as subhuman. And why is that?
Yes.
Because if someone has a dissenting opinion, they're flat out wrong.
Exactly.
And
they're evil, like in this.
In order to call someone a bigot, in order to belittle their opinion, they can't do it with facts.
Yeah. So
what they do is they have to make you subhuman in order for their side to win.
Exactly. Oh, that's absolutely true. And like the word Nazi, everybody now is a Nazi. If you are a left winger and you don't agree with somebody on the right, they're a Nazi. Or a misogynist, or a bigot, or a fascist, or a racist.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
All of those words are just losing their meaning.
Of course they do, because everybody's one now. If I say, you know what, I don't think that there's a problem with black people being arrested more than white people. I'm a racist. No, I didn't say I hated black people. I just said I don't necessarily agree with that. And again, I'm not saying I disagree or not. It's just using this as an example. I'm just saying, I don't necessarily agree that there is necessarily more black people being arrested unfairly, that all the black people in prison were put there unfairly. You know what I'm saying? They broke laws. The laws then because there's more black people, they must be designed to oppress black people. I don't necessarily agree with that. Then you're a racist. No, I'm not a racist. See what I'm saying? It loses its meaning.
If there's 10 crimes tomorrow and 6 of them were committed by women, and I agree with 6 women out of 10 crimes going to jail, I'm not a misogynist.
Exactly.
Or I don't hate women, but that's what they would accuse me of.
Of course, because
it becomes something like we were talking about newspeak, yes. How it was intended to destroy our speech and destroy
yes.
Our points, and so that when you use words, right? When you use words like free, you have to say, you can only use it like my dog is free of lice, yes, right. Or the yard is free of weeds. You can't use it for political freedom or freedom of thought.
Or freedom of thought.
Right. And it's the same thing with, for example, one of the words that our society has done away with is discrimination. If you ever say if I say be discriminating to my kids, right. They'll say, you're teaching them to be racist. You're teaching, and I'm like, no, that's actually a good word. You need to discriminate what you eat, for example. Absolutely. You need to discriminate who you hang out with. Don't go hang out with Absolutely. The kid who's going to get you in trouble or get you in a fight. Be discriminating. It's a very good word that we actually need in our society. But obviously, I'm not saying be discriminating against some people who look different than you. It's right. Obviously I'm not saying be racist, but that word has lost every ounce of meaning except for one thing. So that if somebody overheard you and I talking, right. Like in a coffee shop, and you say discrimination needs to come into play again, and you're talking about in any other scenario other than racism,
right? People
are going to think you're talking about race.
Absolutely. Well, you can't even mention certain words, like say, he said this word without, oh my God, because it'll be taken out of context, because that's what they need it to be taken out of context.
Right. And all you're doing is repeating something.
Right. And you're now a racist, or you're now a hater. For instance, here's another thing. Islam is not a race. So if I dislike Islam, I'm not a racist.
Why do you hate them so much?
But I'm just saying, what I'm saying is that's another thing. It's completely changed its meaning. Now it applies to religions except for Christianity. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't apply to Christianity, but it applies to Islam. I'm a racist if I don't like Islam. No, I'm not. I disagree with the religious system of Islam or the theocratic governments that are Islamic, run by theocratic Islamic governments. I disagree with them. I think they're wrong. But I don't hate people. I'm not a racist because I didn't say I dislike Arabs. I said I dislike the religion. If you say then anybody who dislikes Christianity is a racist. Anybody who dislikes Judaism is a racist. You know what I'm saying? Oh, well, no, it's not the same. It's not the same. Yes, it is the same. It's ridiculous, but it is the same. Again, you see where the meanings of words have been changed to fit a specific narrative, and they can no longer be used in the proper context, which is what you see in this book. Right. That's what they're doing in this book. You can't even think, because people wouldn't think to use the word. In 10 years, our kids, when they hear the word racist, that's what they're going to think. They're going to lump Islam in there because that's the narrative. But Islam, that doesn't apply to them. You know what I'm saying? But It will. That is all they will hear.
Well, how many people have heard over and over and over again, Islam is a peaceful religion. It's a peaceful religion. It's a peaceful religion.
Keep saying it. Maybe it'll be true.
What's that?
Keep saying it, and maybe people will believe it to be true.
Yeah. I'm not going to keep saying it, though. I thought you were telling me. I thought you were giving a command, not an order. Keep saying it, and it'll make it true. And it's like we're not even saying, hey, they're a bunch of they're this, they're that. But we could, like you said, we could say, you know what? I really hate the way they treat women over there. I really hate the way in Iraq that Saddam Hussein did the most terrible, violent, disgusting crimes at will, torturing people. The blood clots with hair all over the place, 500,000 people in mass grave, all that stuff that happened. I really hate that. And they'll say, well, America's just as bad.
Exactly.
You can't really say that. You're just being racist against a religion, like you said.
Well, that's another problem. That's another doublethink way of doing things. Well, you can't say anything is evil at all or wrong because you've been evil or wrong. Remember, he does that to him at the end there when he says, I'm a man and I'm morally stronger than you. And then he plays back for him all the things that he said he was willing to do if he joined the Brotherhood against the party. And they were all these terrible, horrible things. And so therefore it justifies what they're doing to him because he's just as bad and brings him down to this moral level with them. And he's not at the moral level with them because he didn't do any of those things. Do you know what I'm saying? He's never had done those things, and we will never know whether he have done those things or he was just saying that because he wanted to be because he wanted to be part of the Brotherhood. We don't know. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. He's not at the same moral level as these guys are, but they twisted his words so that they can bring him down to their level.
Right.
And that's exactly what they do. Oh, well, you're just as bad as they are. So therefore, you have no right to comment on the bad things they do because you're just as bad as they are. That's this whole thing where we are all equal and there is no truth but our own truth. So your truth is just as bad as mine, or your truth is just as good as mine. So therefore, you have no moral ground against my truth. You can't tell me my truth is wrong.
Controlling the history, too, because when you control the history and kids have no clue what history is, it's something where when you call Trump a fascist Nazi, when you call him and relate him to Hitler, or even Republicans saying that, God, I forgot her name, Hillary Clinton is like Hitler. It's like, no, she kills, she's only killed half as many people as Hitler. So
she's not committing genocide. She just
not that bad.
She just has people killed in their prison cells.
I mean, come on. She just does.
They all commit suicide.
She kind of does the cool stuff like you would see on TV. So we got to give her a little bit of slack. But even her. So you talk about, and even though some Christians would say, well, she's for abortion, so no, I'm not gonna throw all the blood on her hands when it comes to that. But she's not Hitler. Right. And if you think she is, or if you think Trump is, you have no clue what he was and what the Nazis did and what, you have no clue. Tell a Jew that.
Agreed. Agreed.
So,
right, to a Jew, Hitler, yeah. I mean,
I mean,
comparing Trump to Hitler is ridiculous. What has he done that is even remotely like Hitler? Nothing. But again, if you keep saying this, then it makes people hate him. And that's what they need is hate. It's like the 2-minute hate in 1984. You've got to hate him. That's what. But I say the same thing on the right. It's that we do the 2-minute hate for Obama. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we hate Obama. We hate Hillary. And we just sit around and talk about how much we hate these people and we wish they were dead. Well, that's exactly what they're doing to keep us, stirred up. Now, again, I'm not saying don't be aware of just how horrible they can be, or just how much you dislike their policies. But they're not Nazis. I mean, come on.
And as much as you can disagree with somebody and even hate what they stand for, don't use these ridiculous comparisons. Just say, hey, I disagree with their policy. It makes me mad, and this is why. Right. And you can be decent about it. You can even be extremely passionate about it. But when you start using words, that historically just don't add up. Exactly. Even saying, well, maybe she could be. No, she couldn't be. As much as Obama, I didn't like him. He was nothing like Hitler, no, or anybody else. But one thing you see
or
too,
Stalin, or Lenin.
Yeah, one thing I was going to bring up was where it talks about the kids betraying. Who was it? The guy that met him in jail, Parsons.
Parsons, yeah.
Parsons' 7-year-old daughter was listening through a keyhole to him in his sleep, basically saying, I hate Big Brother or something.
That's what he said over and over again, apparently. But he didn't even know he said it.
Essentially, she turned him in. And the thing is, it's like, no, we are not 1984. But when you come across healthcare questionnaires and things you fill out for your child's doctor's visits, the forms, and they have questions like this: is there a gun in your home? Right. Have you ever ridden in with a driver who has had any alcohol? Right. Have you, and it's all about your kids, getting them to turn. Like, why does a doctor need to know if you have a gun in your home? Right. Why would they ever need to know that? Right. And so what you're doing is, when you read 1984, you see that stuff and it makes you a little more angry.
Well, because they're always looking for something to get you on. They're always looking for something, particularly if they know you don't agree with them. That's why people started homeschooling. My dad, one of the reasons why we were homeschooled, I was, I think, in 9th grade when I started homeschooling, was because the counselor in school was telling my 13-year-old brother, that she would help him move back run away from home and move back to Rome so he could stay with his friend and his mom in Rome, both of which were drug dealers and drug addicts and alcoholics. And she actually believed she knew better than my father. And they're always trying to find something wrong. There wasn't anything wrong. And so she started saying, oh, well, I'm going to help you move because, I can find you a better situation than what you're in. Always trying to get him to say things against my parents, which he never really did because they weren't doing anything wrong. You know what I'm saying? And so that idea is happening even now. If you don't agree with them, they try to find ways to get your kids to turn you in. Well, say one thing wrong. Oh, let's go back to the witch trials. Oh, well, the whole big, I don't know if it was Salem. There's a big witch trial where the 7-year-old girl turned in her whole family and they all got killed because the 7-year-old girl, for a piece of candy or whatever, was saying, oh yeah, they were conjuring demon stuff. She didn't understand. You know what I'm saying? But they got the 7-year-old to say what they wanted her to say. Well,
the thing is, when you look at the feminist movement, communist, when you look at, they hate families. They hate family unions. They try to tear them apart. And they hate churches. They hate, and essentially, why do they hate it? When you think about it, it's like the church. If you lose your job, the church should be this community that says, hey, I got your back. You shouldn't ever have to worry about going through this because we got your back, right? Yep. Well, that takes it away from the government's hands.
It's true. Sure.
But it's also with what we were talking about with kids is they have completely taken over. The government has completely taken over education. They've completely taken over. They basically raise your kids, which is why.
True.
And I mean, if somebody doesn't homeschool their kids, I don't want them to feel like I'm attacking that. But that's why Megan and I have decided, we're not gonna let the government have their hands on our kids.
Sure.
Because in the most formative years of your children's lives, which their early years, they're around other kids all this time. They're spending hours and hours every day of every week, more time with other people, more time with, and that's also why my parents took my sisters out of school. But
absolutely.
But they're spending all this time, and then we take them to Sunday school for 1 hour a week. And then by the time the kid's a teenager, we wonder what happened to them.
Yes.
What happened to them? I took them to church every Sunday. Yeah, well, that 1 hour probably had a big impact on them compared to the, 50 hours in this other place.
Absolutely.
And some people do have a situation where they can't. But more and more, what you see are parents, even with this COVID thing, we have all these moms who are like, oh, I hate my kids, or I don't know what to do with them, blah, blah. And I'm like, why did you even have kids?
Exactly.
I mean, if you don't want to spend time with them, it's your job to educate them.
It's true.
And even with church, it's not the pastor's job. It's not the youth pastor's job. If you're a father, you're the youth pastor. If you're a father, you're the children minister. That's your job. That's your role as the head of your household. So it shouldn't be the 1 hour per week, even if your kids do go to school. It shouldn't be the 1 hour per week. It should be a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Hitler said, give me your children, I'll give you the world. It's not the state's job to educate your children. When the state takes over the education, they indoctrinate, and that's the truth. And that's what you begin to see as it's a slow indoctrination, but there's indoctrination. My kids, think about what's happening, and we'll equate, because we got to kind of bring this to an end. We'll equate 1984 to some of the things that are happening now. One of the things is this changing of history and the erasing of old history by taking away monuments, so that this history didn't exist, and the only history that existed is from the perspective they want you to see. We're seeing that now with them trying to get rid of Civil War monuments. Oh, well, it's offensive and it's hateful, and why should it be there? No, it's part of history, and you can't erase history. There was a reason the Civil War was fought. It wasn't just for slavery. I understand that to an African American that might be, oh, well, it represents slavery. That's fine, but it represents a period in history, and we can't rewrite that period in history to fit our narratives now, so that our kids don't know what it was actually fought about, or they don't understand history, or they will be doomed to repeat it. So that we're seeing that now. You change the history books, you change the education system. They even change math, so that parents can't help their kids in their math anymore, because math is supposedly different now. So the way we did math, we can no longer do because of new math. Now, I don't know if a lot of places had kind of changed that back, but I think it's still going on. But that is a direct intentional change, so that the education system, the educators have an understanding that the parents don't have. So the parents can't help their kids. They remove religion from school, only certain ones. Christianity really is the only one that is removed from school. Every other religion is actually taught in school. That's another thing that you see, this changing in narrative. This big corporations. Let's think about it now. We live in a world now where we have given up our freedoms to the government in order to feel safe, which is what, in essence, is happening in 1984. It's how it kind of starts. Big Brother knows better. They're keeping you safe in this war. And they're going to keep you safe. And so we're going to be safe because the government knows better than us. So they're going to take away our freedoms. So we've relinquished our freedoms in order for this sense of safety. So now what has happened is there's a forced recession that is bankrupting whole businesses and putting hundreds and thousands of people into the welfare system. That's only going to happen for a period of time. Well, where are they going to work? If the businesses are gone when they come back, where are they going to work? So, you know who is hiring like crazy? Amazon. Now, I don't think that Amazon is a bad thing, but right now, you have a limited selection of places that you can order stuff from, which means they can control what you can and cannot have. Yeah. So if this becomes a precedent, then Amazon and Walmarts of the world are going to control everything. They're going to control what we can and cannot have. And so therefore the government can then come in and begin to control what you can and cannot have. Their perception, well, I want this book. Well, where am I going to get this book? I can't go to the bookstores because they're all closed down for my good, quote unquote, because we have to social distance. And so I can't go to the bookstore to buy a book. I can't go to an old bookstore because the bookstore's been shut down because they couldn't afford to be shut down for months at a time, and they didn't reopen. So now the only place I can get books from is either go to the library, which is already run by the government and controls what you can and cannot read, or I could go to Amazon, which now is our only option. And so therefore I might not be able to find 1984 in 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Well, it's not relevant anymore. I don't want you to know about 1984. That's not ever really going to happen. Well, Fahrenheit, whatever, is also about burning books. This is about burning books. In Germany, Nazi Germany, they burn books. In Russia, they burn books. Even in the United States, at times, they have refused to allow people to read books. Certain books. Whatever doesn't go with their narrative, you're not allowed to read. So what's to stop them now? And the reality of it is, once you give up your freedom, the only way that you're going to get it back from people, from the government, or from people in power is to take it back by force. And that's what you're seeing. That's why the proles are the future, is because they're the only ones that are going to be able to rise up and take it back and overthrow these governments.
We've given up freedom, privacy, and so forth for convenience.
Absolutely.
Winston couldn't turn the surveillance off, but we choose not to.
Yeah, true.
But the thing is,
I'm on my phone right now. If I make a Google search,
the thing is, what you said, I wanted to
link to everything else. Like if I go,
I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about the church and state, and how they have effectively gotten in, but talking about changing the narrative and distorting the truth in the matter when it comes to church and state. I talk to people all the time, and they don't have an understanding of what the founding fathers had, even the reformers, the Christian Protestant reformers. Their view is that not that the government, it's that the government had no business in getting involved in the church. Our First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It's towards Congress, directed at Congress. The understanding many have today of separation of church and state has been perverted by the secularists to mean God shall have no say in state matters.
Right.
But this is a wicked distortion, much more in line with the attitude that the French revolutionaries had, completely opposite of what the American revolutionaries' mindset was.
Right.
So our founders explicitly said, as I had said before, that George Washington, without God and the Bible, is impossible to govern a nation. Yeah. And Adams talking about our government was made for a moral and a religious people. So, you can go down the road about our founders a lot, but it's crazy how we have just let them change and warp that view. No separation of church and state. Well, what do you think about marriage? Well, you know what, man and woman, that doesn't count because separation of church and state.
Right.
But that's what, essentially that's what happens.
Designed to prevent interracial marriage. Like we make this whole the government determines who can and cannot get married, and therefore we need to have gay marriage, recognized by the government. Why do you have to have it recognized by the government?
Right. I agree with that. It should not. There should be. When people ask me about the marriage thing, I say the government shouldn't have any say in it at all. At all. But here's the thing: is talking again with the libertarian. When it comes to a law, unfortunately, we do have a government who does stick their foot where it doesn't belong. They do stick their hand in the shower to change the temperature. And when they do, we have to say, you know what? I like it. I like it medium hot, not
stop turning it down or turning it up.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, my stance is they should have no say in the government at all, or in marriage at all. Yeah. But I don't get it the way I want it. So what am I going to say? I'm going to say what the Word of God says is that it's between a man and a woman.
That's right.
And I'm not going to take the libertarian stance, for example, in that case, and say, well, who cares who they marry? You know,
it's true. So I think we can definitely see how, you know, Orwell was a bit of a prophet, and we're seeing this now. However you want to say it, we've given up freedoms, even more freedoms recently, that I personally don't believe were necessary to give up. And they didn't make us safer, but the perception of it, like O'Brien said, it is not about whether or not it really makes you safe when talking about all these things with COVID. It is whether or not I say it is and you believe it is. Then therefore it becomes truth. And that's what we're seeing here is we believe that we are safer because of this, when in actuality we are no safer and our economy is being collapsed around us. And we've given up a level of freedom that we never should have given up to the government that unfortunately I personally believe is now set a precedent that we'll see more of this. That they'll do this every time that there's a new disease, and you'll find out that there's a new disease every year, certainly every time they want to gain control of something. And it's not even just the governments. You've given scientists control over your world. We didn't give them control over it before. Sure, you might want to believe in evolution, and that's become an acceptable theory as truth, even though it's not true. And it's still a theory, and it's never been proven that it has been in everybody's mind, in the social conscious, as a truth, even though it is not a truth. Now we're giving these people control over how we will and will not live. You know, doctors have been saying for years, well, you need to eat a certain way, you need to do a certain thing, and so we know better than you, and you should eat and do and live the way we tell you to live. And now they've actually been given the power to control that to some degree, to where people are like, oh, okay, so we're actually going to do everything you tell us to do and live exactly the way you tell us to live. And it's like this, you know, because it's for your own good. Well, that changes too, because this doctor says this, and this doctor says that, and this scientist says that, and this scientist says that, because it isn't a search for truth necessarily. And so, you know, one minute it's keto is the great thing. The next minute it's not keto. It's going to be this. And eggs were bad, and now eggs are good. And you see what I'm saying? Everything changes from the moment. You can't go by that. And so now, by the whims of these people, we're going to change our lives all the time. And we've given them the freedom to tell us how we will and will not live. If you want to stay in your house because you're afraid of COVID, stay in your house because stay in your house. I'm not telling you can't stay in your house, but don't tell me I have to stay in my house. I am not going to kill you if I go outside my house. And that's the whole thing. Well, you want to die. I had somebody say that on Facebook. Oh, if you want to die, fine, go out. Well, then let me die. If I'm going to die, let me die. It's my right to go out. You can't tell me I can't. That's what the Constitution is there for in the First Amendment. I have the right to go outside if I want to go outside. You can't tell me I can't. Well, it's for your own good. You see what I'm saying? And that's the way it starts in 1984, and that's the way it starts in every totalitarian government. With those simple words, it's for your own good.
Well, a few months ago, if you would have told me one day, a day is coming where you might, within the next 6 months, where you might have to call the local magistrate to see if you can actually go to your buddy's house and have dinner with your families getting together. You know, and it hasn't got to that point, of course, but
there's a possibility
getting that way. I mean, what if something next year, instead of the coronavirus, it might be the super coronavirus?
Well, they're already talking about how next year we're going to have a resurgence of the coronavirus and the flu, and it's going to be twice as bad because we're going to be fighting both, and that this is going to be an every year thing now. That's what they've already started saying.
Instead of having certain areas, again, we talked about this, instead of having certain areas, for example, New York City, if you want to do a lockdown or shutdown or just the old people there or whatever, that's great. But why would you make it the same in upstate New York? Right. Why would you do Northern California the way you do Southern California? Why would you treat it doesn't make sense the way they've done this whole lockdown.
It doesn't. Not at all. And there have been other countries, I can't remember the name of the country that didn't do the lockdown, and they had the exact same numbers as everybody else, and they didn't do all this. And the numbers were still the same. Go ahead.
I mean, it's gotten crazy, but the thing is, though, it's how it starts, though. It's like, I never thought I would see a day. And it's kind of like 1984 kind of gets you imagining things. He goes over the top on some things, but it's like at some point could you imagine yourself like Winston, where the greatest pleasure I get is reaching down and scratching my ankle where that sore is, where and it feels good, and then I get to drink some nasty gin, and those are my two pleasures in life.
Well, if you were to ask somebody from Russia a couple of years ago what they thought, probably would have felt the same thing.
It's spot on, George.
Yeah, and again, I think Russia was his primary inspiration.
Yeah, Russia. He also mentioned fascism, the Nazis, like when they asked him about it.
Yeah. Well, he said that they all tried to do it and they were all wrong. They didn't do it as well as the party is doing it. They all tried.
Stalin did it better than all of them.
Yeah. But the party is the final evolution, if you would, of the Super Saiyan of socialism, of totalitarianism, and that
this
other
book,
forms of government tried to do it.
1984 is like a nightmare book for people, and it's supposed to be, the dystopian novel, but it's for like liberals, like your governor up there, Kumo. He probably reads it for pleasure, like at least once a week. He probably just sits there and smiles like, man, that guy O'Brien's off the chain. And I'm going to make everybody wear masks.
Well, think about it now. How many people are like turning their family, oh my gosh, that person came out and he's not wearing a mask and this person's doing this. And, even the hate on Facebook. Like I've had a hard time going on Facebook because of constant hate. It's one side or the other. You know what I'm saying? If you don't agree with them, then you're killing people. No, I'm not killing anybody. I don't have corona. I can't give you corona if I don't have it. How do you know you don't have it? You know what I'm saying? You might not have symptoms. Okay, well, then obviously it's not that big a deal. Well, I might get it and die. Well, honestly, you have a 0.001% chance of dying or whatever. And I was listening to one doctor the other day who was saying that the numbers that they actually used were wrong. So it's actually that more people probably have it because it is pretty contagious, but that less people are actually dying from it. So that lowers the death toll.
Well, there have been a lot of studies, actually. There have been quite a few groups that have tested where there have been up to 60, 70, 80% of people who have tested positive with no symptoms at all. They're walking around with coronavirus asymptomatic.
Right.
So, that's basically what you just said, but I forgot how many people were in the group study that I read about. But yeah, it's really interesting though, because moving forward, I mean, these nutcases that are governing, especially in the blue states, I mean, they're just like, they're wanting this thing to last forever, I think.
Well, but I don't even know, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if it's just the government. I really think that this is what, for years, I mean, this is what medical professionals that are in these fields, or scientists. We talked about this as science as a religion, and medical science is no different. They have to set themselves up as the savior. They're going to save us from all of these horrible things, and we need to sit in the side and do everything they tell us to do so they can save us from ourselves or save us from all the horrible things in the world. Just think about the extremeness. And I blame the media, too, for they created a lot of this. But here's the thing, I go outside and I'm either going to die or kill somebody. And that's just those extremes are just simply not true. It isn't that extreme.
Well, they act like superior because they act superior because you walk outside and they have a mask on and you don't. So they act superior because they say, "Well, you idiot! All the medical professionals disagree with your point of view." And it's like, well, no, actually, I have. You can name a couple of epidemiologists and doctors in medicine that are saying.
Quite a few,
to be precautious. Yeah, quite a few, and be precautious, this and that, and this is what I think about it. Well, you're an idiot because CNN today there was a doctor who said this, or it could be the worst thing ever. I mean, it's worse than Spanish influenza, which 52 million people died, and it's like, oh yeah, clearly more
people died from Spanish flu than the plague. They were saying, or something like that. It was so devastating.
52 million. I mean, that's not nearly as many as communism killed, but
no.
I mean, not even close. But actually,
still,
Stalin killed 60 million or 50 million?
He killed quite a few. But even so, that's nowhere near this. Honestly, the death toll is not as high as the flu. This whole, oh, yes, it is. It's more deadly than the flu. It's not. It's not deadlier than the flu. That's the reality of this. You know what I've heard one doctor's response was? Well, then we should treat the flu the same way. Okay, so what you want to do is shut down the world. We should all be walking around in hazmat suits all the time because we may die going outside our door. Welcome to human existence. Since the beginning of human existence, we may die going outside the door. That's the price you pay for being alive. You know what I'm saying? Oh, well, we can prevent it. Yes, there are things we can do, sure. And if you want to walk around with a mask, walk around with a mask.
Well,
okay?
Jay, if you want a social life, there's Facebook, right?
Right.
If
well,
you want
that's
a social
the point.
life.
Yeah, that's, But here's the thing. You want to stay at home because you're afraid to go outside? Well, then you better find a job that you can do at home because you're not going to come work at McDonald's and we're not going to hold your job and pay you not to come out of the house 6 months out of the year because you're afraid. That's not the way this works. So you better become a web designer or something that you don't have to leave your house for because that's the truth. You cannot live that way. And we cannot shut the world down every 6 months because of some new disease. Now, again, I'm not, if this really was Spanish flu and people really were dying on that kind of level, then I would say, yes, stay at home. Yeah. These measures would be necessary. Sure, absolutely. I'm not going to go outside either, but they're not. And they were doing this long before this was even a problem. You know what I'm saying? Before they had any kind of numbers. Oh, we wanted to prevent it. Okay. So you shut down the world and bankrupt a bunch of people, and now a bunch of people don't have jobs or are going to lose their jobs or have lost their businesses, and you want to keep this going for until next year, and then you want to do it again every winter. Well, okay, well then you need to lose your job. Then you need to not get paid. Well, I'm a doctor. I'm a whatever. I need, no, then you don't get paid either. If I can't work every 6 months, then you can't work every 6 months. You know, or you pay for it. You're working, then you pay for my unemployment because you actually get to work. So you pay, and you're the one who's preventing me from work because you're saying that if I go out, I'm going to die. Then you should pay for my unemployment. I mean, really.
Well, it'll eventually come to, it's funny too when you look at this and you start seeing how different people react. Yeah. And there's people like Christians that I disagree with their end times points of view. But every time there's an epidemic, every time there's anything. Now, I will agree with this one guy who said that there's never been quite one like this where the whole world is looking at the same thing. But it's just a small thing at that. True. But it's something where, I agree with that. But every time there's something, you always say this is the end. It's a sign of the end. Because why? Because Jesus said there would be pestilences and this and that and the other. But when you really read how cyclical the things, the plagues, the judgments, all this stuff is in Revelation, you see that this is something that goes on through time until he comes back. Right. And you have to look at it and say, this isn't the only plague, and it's not the worst plague, and there have been wars nonstop throughout history. And this is not nearly as bad as the bubonic plague, where if you got the bubonic plague within 24 hours, you're toast.
Oh, the Spanish flu was the same. It evolved to the point where people, doctors, nurses, you came in contact with somebody with it, within 24 hours you were dead. It's that simple. Yeah. And they were wearing masks and gloves. I mean...
Well, we're a lot smarter than they are there now. Today.
Well, I'm not, I'm not trying to minimize things, but I just don't think we should cater to fear. And that's where I have a problem. When you hear people saying, well, if it makes people feel safe, then why not just do it? Well, that's fine to a degree, okay? I'm not against trying to make people feel safe. But if you were doing more damage than what the virus is doing to make people feel safe, then yes, it's wrong to make people, then you shouldn't be doing this to make people feel safe. If you have to bankrupt somebody else and take away their business to make somebody feel safe, then it's wrong.
It's back to the quote, when they lost their job, it didn't bother me because I didn't lose mine. Then when the other people lost their job, I didn't lose my job. But then now when you're right, then it comes to you. And it's not so pleasant then.
It's not so pleasant anymore, right? And I'm not trying to minimize people that died from this. Like, if you have a family member who died from this, I'm not trying to say that that's not tragic. But
right.
But would they had stayed inside, or if everybody around them had worn a mask, they probably still would have gotten it. You know what I'm saying? So that's my take on this, and I think that's where we're beginning to see 1984 as this idea that if we give government control, the only way to take it back is through force, and eventually we become so whittled down that the thought of force becomes so overwhelming to us that we're not willing to do it. And and that's why he's saying the proles were the answer, was because unless they rise up, this government's never going to be overthrown. But the proles have been so beaten down, the thought of rising up is so overwhelming to them that they just simply won't do it. Or we've become, in the one guy's book, we've become so content, like Rome, with our spectacles and our entertainment, that we don't realize that our freedoms are being taken away, or that we're even really starving. Because you know what? I got my spectacles, I've got my Xbox, I've got my Facebook, I've got my television, I've got my Netflix, I can binge watch, so I don't see the slow whittling away of my freedoms. It's the same kind of thing. You can do both. But again, I'm not trying to minimize the fact that if you're afraid and you really believe that if you stay in your house and wear a mask that you're not going to die, that's fine. But I just think that we need to really reevaluate what kind of freedoms we're willing to give the government, because once we give them to them, we're not going to get them back.
Yeah, I think that's kind of thinking about when they take it. Thomas Jefferson was always worried about that. All the founding fathers were, but especially the anti-federalist. Yeah. But it reminds me of Thomas Jefferson's quote: "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure." But I think he saw things in that, they're going to take power, and you're going to have to get it back. Now, he was a bit too much of a revolutionary, but even supporting the French Revolution, or not really having good wisdom as far as his views on the French Revolution. But anyway, it's something where, especially like I said, especially the Cuomo's. Is that how you say your governor's name? Cuomo. Especially the Cuomo's and the other people. It's like, this is like their most delightful time ever. They get to really throw down their hands, and
I think there's truth in that. I mean, I think the government, they want to gain power, they've gained control, they've made people dependent on them, and you need to be dependent on me, and that's what they want, because that's socialism. That's how you gain power and keep it. You make the people dependent on you. They can't exist without you, and that's what's happening. I mean, when you bankrupt an economy, then the people become dependent upon the government, and that But anyway, whether you agree or not, it's setting a dangerous precedent, and this is one of the reasons why the Civil War was fought. It wasn't just fought for slavery. It wasn't just fought to keep black people down. That is a terrible part of what was going on in the South, and it needed to end. But the reality of it is that the majority of the people did not fight to retain slavery. That was just a symptom of them, of somebody coming in and taking away their freedoms, and telling them how, somebody from the North telling them how they had to run themselves in the South, and that isn't right. Whether you like it or not, majority rules isn't always the best way of working either. That's why we created a government that is a republic. It's a democratic republic and not a true democracy, because a true democracy is mob rules, and mob rules isn't always good either. It's just as bad as socialism at times. True democracy can be just as bad as socialism. It can, because because if you can control the masses, then you can control the way the world is going to go. And so that's why liberals are trying to do away with our system of government into a true democracy, because they figure they can control the masses through the media, and so therefore they will gain and retain power forever. That's their view. But if we have a democratic republic, then everybody's voice has a right to be heard, not just the mob. You know what I'm saying?
My voice is going to always say, keep your hand out of my shower. don't tread on me. That's my unique way of saying it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's true. That's very true, though. And I think
Yeah.
that, we need to realize that mob rules doesn't work any more than totalitarianism works. But anyway, so to finish this off, I really enjoyed this book a lot. And I think it's very applicable. However you want to look at it, you can apply what he's saying in 1984 to really any tyrannical government, whether you believe that right wing is tyrannical or whether you believe left wing.
Any government overreach.
Any government overreach you can find in this. But I think that it was very prophetic in what we're seeing in today's world, in our digital world, where we're really just kind of giving up our freedoms. And so we're giving up more and more freedoms every day. And the more freedoms we give up, the closer we become to this kind of government, this kind of world. We're giving power to people who say they're going to do things for our good, but in the end, is it really for our good? Or can they maintain that? Like he says in 1984, it may have started out that way, but in the end it became about power. And we've seen that in almost every government because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So anyway, I really enjoyed this book. I recommend it to anybody. I think that you can find it applicable and very prophetic. Find it very interesting that it was written 70 years ago. I thought it was actually written in the 70s. So when I'm thinking, oh, this is what he thought the world was going to be like in 1984. But then again, I was watching Transformers, the movie from the 80s, and it supposedly took place in 2005. And I'm like, wait a minute, the flying cars and, lasers.
Oh, yeah.
and I'm just like, and the world is different. And I'm like, that's not the way it is in 2005. But in 1980s, 20 years, that's what they thought.
Back to the Future movies, too.
Exactly. Yeah, what they thought the world was going to look like. But it's very interesting that how much of a futurist he kind of was. And some of the things he got right, obviously it's extreme, but some of the things he got right, that, our freedoms are given up and we're constantly being watched. And we're constantly being monitored, whether it be from the government or whether it be from, Google, where I type something into YouTube. And then when I go on my Google search, oh, you want this. You know what I'm saying? Like I typed in Alexandra Daddario in whatever, because I wanted to watch a video, something on her or see an interview with her. I hit my Google search and Alexandra Daddario pops up. Well, I didn't search for Alexandra Daddario. Well, you must want to know about that. And you must want to see Alexandra Daddario movies. No, why? Where the heck did that come from? Because we're always being watched. All of our information is always being used by these big governments and by these big corporations. So he got that right. We're beginning to see that. Brother. Yes, I love Big Brother. Big Brother is always watching.
Makes me feel safe.
I just love him. And we were always at war with Eurasia. I mean,
this book will make you not want to get undressed in front of a mirror.
That is true. Or the television. I remember when it was a big deal. When Xbox One first came out, the Kinect that was attached to it was always on, and you had to have the Xbox on all the time or it wouldn't work. Like you couldn't shut it on and off. I remember there's like this big thing, and so people threw a fit because it meant they could be watching you all the time. So they had to change that to where they couldn't just access and it wasn't on all the time, because people were like, "You're watching us." And, it was, in a way for them to kind of gain control and to find out what you liked and what you wanted so they can gear their sales to what you want. But it can be used because the Kinect was a camera. So it could be used in a very bad way. So people were refusing to buy the Xbox. I remember that was a big deal when it first came out. And it actually cost them a lot of sales until they changed that. And, and I don't know that, Microsoft was trying to look into your houses necessarily, but it can be used. I mean, even hackers have used camera systems. There have been a lot of stories of that where your home security systems, hackers have hacked into that and used that to watch you and then blackmail you. You have to be careful what because this stuff's all connected to the internet. It's not like it's going on a videotape anymore. It's all digital, and it's all going to the cloud. Well, if somebody hacks into the cloud, then they have all your information. We had, all of the celebrities not too long ago when they had all of their private phones hacked into and all these, compromising pictures and videos put up on the internet, because these hackers got into their phones because it's up on the cloud. They got into your information. It's crazy. And he got that in 1984. I think he really kind of prophesied that. So just be careful. I guess we all need to realize that Big Brother's always watching.
Indeed.
And we love Big Brother. But one last thought before we leave, before we end this. I like the concept of hate crime and thought crime are very similar in my opinion, because you're determining the thought process of a person. So, for instance, if I beat up a gay person or a black person, it's a hate crime. Well, why is it a hate crime? Because you're white and you're not gay. Well, how do you know I beat them up because they were gay? It doesn't matter. It's a hate crime. Well, it's the same kind of thing with thought crime. It's all about what's inside of your head, your motives in your head. Very similar to, what was that, Minority Report, that they're arresting criminals that haven't actually committed crimes yet, but according to the psychics will commit crimes. You know what I'm saying? How can you control my thoughts? How can you determine what I was thinking unless I tell you?
And if the psychic was that good, why hasn't he winning the lottery?
There you go. Well, they had him all they had him in this, in this water and this machine. They weren't really living. It's crazy. But what I'm saying is that it's very similar. That the idea of a hate crime is very similar. You're determining what a person's thought, reasoning behind their crime is, and you're judging them and giving them harsher penalties for what you think their motives were. Right. How do you know what their motives are? How do you know what I'm thinking? It's the same kind of thing. And so, I really kind of see that as an evolution of this too. Like this could very well turn into thought crime where we're arresting you because you think that black people or I'm not going to necessarily use black people, you think that gay people are bad, so therefore I'm arresting you. Well, why? Because you thought that. Well, how do you know I thought that? You know what I'm saying? It's a thought crime. Your motives.
They'll have to do that because you can't really have free speech to hear what people actually do think.
That's true. You can't.
That's true. So it's like, well, if I would have said it, I would have been fired, but you thought it.
Right. So that's bad enough. You should be fired because you thought it. You know what I'm saying? Anyway. I'm just saying.
We just need to live in a world where
I don't agree with hate crimes. There are crimes. Okay, if I murder somebody, I murdered somebody. There shouldn't be some weird harsher penalty because they're a different race than me or a different sex. Sexual orientation. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, how is that? Well, it's a hate crime. What? You know what I'm saying? I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think that's very similar to thought crime. But if you agree with hate crime, great. That's fine. You're allowed to feel that way. But I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it's kind of very similar to thought crime. You can't judge me by my thoughts. It's not your place. I'm allowed to have thoughts. My actions you can judge me on, but you can't judge me on the intent of my actions. To some degree. I mean, obviously, when you have different levels of murder, obviously if someone thinks about murder, goes out and stalks somebody and then kills them intentionally, that's first degree murder. It was premeditated. That's different. But, he killed them because he didn't like their, sexual orientation. Well, how do you know that? Unless I tell you I killed them but then I'm already being on trial for first degree murder. What more is there? Oh, well, now it's a hate crime. What? You know what I'm saying? Because the intention is hateful. Okay. Well, murder is always intentionally hateful, I would have to say.
Right. I mean, there needs to be evidence for whatever. There needs to be law, and there needs to be actual evidence for your opinion. I mean, it goes into the media and the slander that they throw at politicians. Where they can say about anything about them. It's like, why would you say that? There's no evidence for that.
Right.
So anyway,
I enjoyed this book. Hopefully, what do you think, Doug? Would you recommend this book?
No.
Okay.
No, I absolutely I would. I think it's great.
As a writer, I was thoroughly enjoyed it and was thoroughly depressed that I did not write it. It's one of those books you read and you really say at the end the author got the point across, and he did in a very powerful way. He really did. I really enjoyed it a lot. Not only because I think it's applicable, and I think it's applicable in any period of life. Honestly, you could apply what he's talking about to the Catholic Church in the Dark Ages during the Inquisition. I mean, there's so much you can take from this and really apply to any kind of totalitarian government or power. But I really enjoyed it. So I recommend it. It definitely is one of my favorite reads in a long time that isn't, fiction. Well, it isn't like Pulp Fiction-ish, Star Wars or fantasy or military sci-fi or something. Really enjoyed it. So I hope that you enjoyed the commentary. As always, if you like the content we're creating, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate that. It helps us out a lot. We're not monetized at this point. I don't know that we ever will be, but we're not monetized at this point. So we're not trying to make money off of these videos, but we definitely want to know that you enjoyed. If you obviously, if you have any comments, obviously leave them in the comments and we'll get back to you. Nothing that is hateful or intentionally trying to promote a specific hateful opinion against Christianity.
We just lost half our fans.
But I mean, if you don't like us, if you disagree with us, say it, but do it properly. Don't be mean. Don't be nasty. Don't swear at us and call us misogynist, hate mongering, racist. We're just going to block you and delete your comment. But if you want to leave a comment and you want to disagree with us, that's great. I love to hear from you guys. If you want to say that we have great content, you like what we're creating, absolutely leave us a comment there. You want to leave your own interesting comments about 1984 and what you thought about the book and how it applies to today's world and what you see as you see the world kind of running headlong towards this kind of thing, this kind of dystopian world. Great. If you think that we're all just loony and the world's going to be great and everything's going to be awesome, and everything is awesome, then put that in the comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. As always, you can reach us at thechristiansages@gmail.com. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter at The Christian Sages. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line, and we will get back to you as soon as you can. As always, if you have any prayer requests, please leave them in the comments, or you can email us. We don't check the email as much as I'd like to, so it might take us a little while to get back to you if you email us. But the comments, we get instant messages letting us know that you commented, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can, and we'll always be praying for you. Hopefully you had a great night, and you love the content that we created, and thank you again for listening.
Good night.
Good night. Love you all.